Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
Let's talk about football boots for people with wide feet. Specifically, why don't football boot brands make football boots specifically for wide feet? Well, they do, or at least New Balance does, because what I have right here is the 2E wide fit variation of their latest football boot, the 442 version 2 Pro. It retails for $130, features kangaroo leather through the forefoot and toe box area, and an overall shape that is wider than the regular fit version, which I also happen to have. And as you can see, aside from the colorway difference, of course, it's a very similar looking football boot. So given that this is regular fit and this is wide fit, what are actually the differences between the two? Or in other words, what have they actually changed to make this one wider? Well, we're going to get into just that, including how both of these boots fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around. And if you are interested in the New Balance 442 and either the regular fit or wide fit variations, you can actually pick them up below their normal retail prices by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the links down in the description. Now, when you talk about a wide fit pair of football boots, I think most people automatically assume that in order to achieve a wider fit, they make a wider base, a wider sole plate, and that is actually not true at all, because if you look at the regular fit and wide fit variations of these two football boots, the sole plate tooling, the shape, the width, the everything is exactly the same. How does that make any sense? Well, it does and it doesn't. The TLDR explanation as to why they don't make physically wider sole plates for a wide fit variation is mostly down to cost on their end. And I'm not going to get into the business side of football boot manufacturing, but the cost of molds for an entire size run in a wider width just probably wouldn't be worth it, or at least that's what I would assume. However, it is a big misconception in regards to football boots for wider feet that you need to have a sole plate base that is at least as wide as your feet. And more often than not, even if you don't have wide feet, that's not going to be the case. You're always going to have that little bit of hang off along the edges of the upper, where in a leather upper football boot in particular, which this one does have, you're going to typically have more stretch and more hang off, which again, isn't necessarily a bad thing and often can mean that you have a pair of football boots that has adapted to the shape of your feet, really giving you that customized fit. The only time having some hangover along the edges is going to be an issue is if it's causing discomfort and blistering and rubbing that you wouldn't obviously want. But more often than not, having that little bit of hangover is totally normal and nothing to worry about. So if the sole plate isn't any wider when you're talking about the wide fit variation, then surely they must have made the upper wider, and they have by way of shaping it around a bigger, wider, higher volume last. Again, not to get too technical on the manufacturing process, but if you can imagine the upper being made and laid out flat on a table, in order for it to start to look like a football boot, they take the sole plate, which is just a standalone piece, they take what looks kind of like a foot, also known as a last, and they form that upper around the sole plate, gluing the two pieces together, and then obviously it just has to sit there in order to dry and be in the shape of a pair of football boots. In the case of New Balance's wide fit variation here, they've effectively done just that. They've formed the upper around a wider, higher volume last, where I would say more so through the midfoot than anywhere else on this football boot. There is simply more volume and more width, which of course is going to be more accommodating to a wider foot type. But do keep in mind that this difference is relatively subtle. You can see here side by side, and again, they're in different colorways, so it's kind of difficult to tell. There's not a gigantic difference in terms of how much volume and how much extra width there is to this upper on the black shoe, which is the wide fit variation, and the regular fit variation here in white. You can see there's some spacing differences if you just pay attention to the top of the New Balance N and how much space there is between that and the lace hole. If you look at the same spot here on the wide fit variation, you can see that there is ever so slightly more space, but realistically, you're not really going to be able to see the difference, but you will be able to feel it when the boots are on feet. Speaking of which, when you do get them on feet, there is definitely a noticeable difference between the two, although again, I would still say it's relatively subtle unless you really know your football boots. On my right foot, I have the wide fit variation. On my left foot, the regular fit variation. I guess the best way to show you the width difference is just to look at either side of the upper and how close they come together with the laces tied tight. I think what's great about this football boot in particular, for wide feet in general, is the central lacing system and standalone tongue. It allows the upper to open up as much as possible, and because that lacing system runs nice and deep, it gives you plenty of adjustability to add width or tighten lots of different sections of the upper independently. And I think with this wider shape that you have here on the wide fit variation, it's subtle, but it's very noticeable, more so through the midfoot than anywhere else. Obviously the kangaroo leather through the forefoot and toe box area, that you don't have to worry too much about because it's so soft and it's going to stretch as you wear the boots in. In the heel, however, I would say the width is relatively similar, although I also think it's pretty uncommon for somebody to have a super wide heel as well, so I don't view that as much of an issue. Either way, I think that the regular fit variation will fit most people, even if you do have wider feet. Again, this would be a better option for somebody that has a problem fitting in most football boots and genuinely needs something that little bit wider, and that's really what this has on offer. For me, given the choice between these two, the regular fit variation just fits me better and feels better on feet. As far as sizing is concerned, no difference in sizing between regular and wide fit either. I'm wearing both of these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So whether you go for wide or regular fit, I would recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, like I've talked about in a couple different videos already, I think the 442 version 2 Pro from New Balance is simply one of the best value for money football boots on the market. And if you're on the market for a pair of leather football boots in particular, the value that this has on offer, the quality that this has on offer, really makes you question whether or not the $200+ leather boot options out there are actually even worth it. In the case of having a football boot specifically tailored for wide feet, I definitely think the wide fit variation is one of your best options out there, and even the regular fit variation I think is going to work well for most people. Unless you have extremely wide feet, I think most people would probably be better off sticking for the regular version of the 442, but if you're finding that your feet just don't fit in most football boots because of width, giving this 2E wide fit variation of the 442 a go would probably be a really good idea.